Are you ready?
Yep. Well, good morning and welcome along to our live stream bushfire update. We've done a few of these during the course of the day to see if we can have one during the business hours in most parts of the world. So according to my calculations, it's around 9:15 now in the UK, 10:15 in Germany, 11:15 in Finland, and it is 8:15 in the evening here. Now, with the earlier live streams, we just saw the background out here behind me at Robin's Nest. You've got this beautiful forest. There's a shop. That's earlier in the day. In fact, that was only like an hour ago because there's Captain Sponge sitting next to me. We have had rain all day. It has just been absolutely magnificent, and it's good rain. It's good soaking rain. Normally, when you're doing any sort of video promoting tourism, you sort of think, oh, I hope it's a nice sunny day. But I've got to tell you, this weather is absolutely sensational, and we need the rain really badly. So we're coming to you live from Merimbula on the south coast of New South Wales, and because it's 8:15, you're having your coffee. I'm just having a quiet little ale here as we put this presentation together. First and foremost, if you want to chat to us, on the right-hand side of the screen, you should see a little blue button with a chat sign on it. If you click on that, that will expand. Then you click on the three little bars on the top right-hand side in the blue, and you can register there. You can just enter as a guest, or you can perhaps enter via Facebook or whatever best works for you. And then if you want to ask us any questions at all, or just say hello and where you're watching us from, I've got that right in front of me. And if I miss it, my colleague Anthony's got another copy over there that he's watching as well. So if you get onto the chat program and ask a few questions or say hi, that's really good for us because it's good for our ego because we know someone's actually watching when you do that. Over the past week, we've completed the coastal drive between Sydney and Melbourne since the road through the Crower-Jingalong National Park finally opened after being closed for about 6 weeks. We've done lots of filming. We've spoken to a lot of tourism operators to really get the full picture of how the Sydney-Melbourne coastal drive has been impacted by these fires during this horrible summer season. The Sydney-Melbourne Coastal Drive covers two of the three most affected regions, fire regions in Sydney. That is the southern part of New South Wales, Far East Gippsland in Victoria, and of course those horrible fires on Kangaroo Island and the Adelaide Hills in South Australia. So 2 out of the 3 have been in our patch. And what we're going to do now is really sort of uncover more of the real story and a little bit less on what you've probably seen in your nightly news for the last several weeks. But before we get started on all that, I'd like to introduce my first co-host, Peter from Sapphire Waters Motoring. How are you?
Good, thank you.
And how did you get through the last 6 weeks? It's been, I guess, quite a challenge in a place like Merimbula.
Yes, it certainly was when the fires first started to come north from down south. We had to evacuate all our guests that we had that were staying over the Christmas New Year period. Then the people from Malakuta were evacuated, all the holiday makers, so they had to come this way because the road was closed to Melbourne. So they come to Merimbula, and so that they could head out via Canberra and then travel down the Hume, which was a lot longer for them. At least they were safe. Some of them just left their caravans and tents. They were just camping. And, so the town was pretty awful for a few days.
I imagine it would have been quiet, and I'm also assuming that perhaps January is not the best time of the year to be evacuating your clients and so forth.
No, it wasn't very good.
Yeah, well, we'll come back to Sapphire Waters and have a bit more of a look at the property and learn a little bit more about what you offer there. But Anthony and I have stayed there many times, and we've had familiar trips there as well. It certainly is a lovely property here at Merimbula and a part of the Sydney-Melbourne Coastal Drive. So at the moment, we're in the Bega Valley. Bega Valley is part of the beautiful Sapphire Coast region, and it's in the far south of New South Wales before you cross the border into the equally beautiful Gippsland and work your way through all of those lovely national parks and wonderful things you can see and do right along the whole drive. Firstly, let's bring up a map and have a chat about the fire impacted areas. as I said, we've done this particular drive all the way through. My wife Lorraine and I did Sydney down to Bateman's Bay last week when we still couldn't get all the way through because of the road closure. And then Anthony and I have gone from Melbourne via Walhalla and Lakes Entrance and Gypsy Point just over the last few days, shooting video all the way and putting together quite a few different segments. So from Sydney down to Jervis Bay, is completely fire free. We did not see any evidence of any fires on this part of the drive. And then after we left Jervis Bay and headed down towards Ulladulla, we could see some fire impact on the side of the road north of Ulladulla. And then after Ulladulla, around Pebbly Beach and the Mummarang. I shouldn't have that beer, should I? I should have stuck with the water. It's been quite heavily impacted there. And these fires were before Christmas. Then after Christmas, around New Year's Eve, is when we had those horrible fires threatening Malakuta and also Mogo, which is below Bateman's Bay. And those Mogo fires went from the town of Mogo right across almost to the coast of Browlee before another wind direction saved that particular area. Once you get down to Narooma, the drive from Narooma all the way to Eden along the coast via Tathra and Merimbula and Pambula is completely fire-free. There has been no direct flame or fire incidents on that part of the drive at all. If you're doing the inland drive, sticking with the I was going to say the Hume, the Princess Freeway, Bega is completely fire free, and the bulk of the drive between Bega and Eden, again, completely fire free. But Cobargo is an area that was hit pretty hard, and the images from Cobargo and Mogo would certainly be the sorts of images that you've probably seen on your TV screens several times a day and night, unfortunately. Once you go through Eden, about 4 kilometres out of Eden, the fire front starts again, and you can see quite significant damage to our beautiful bush all the way down to almost Cairn River. And then after Cairn River, there's a few spots between Cairn River and Orbost. And after Orbost, no fire activity all the way through to Melbourne, regardless of whether you're going via Walhalla or via Wilson's Promontory and Phillip Island. Now, having said that, there are areas, if you drive off the road, you will see fire activity. For example, in Bairnsdale, if you're going north of Bairnsdale on the Great Alpine Road, which is not showing on the map, about 10 or 15 minutes out of Bairnsdale, you'll see fire activity. If you're coming down the New South Wales south coast and you go inland a little bit to Kangaroo Valley and places like that, you will also see fire impact as well. So in terms of one of the questions that I've received so many emails from since Christmas is the road black all the way? The answer is no. In fact, only, I think it's 18% of the roadside has been impacted by some degree in these fires. So that means 82% has not even been impacted. I think it's very important that we acknowledge what has been lost. It has been a difficult season for many people have lost their homes. We have no idea on the wildlife toll. And of course, the damage to infrastructure. And unfortunately, some people have even lost their lives. So it has been a very trying time, but not as bad as the whole country being on fire that you continually see in the media, or the whole coastal drive for that matter being on fire, because it's just not true. We've got some remarkable stories that we've uncovered during our trip along the road trip. And the first thing I'd like to do is just play a little video just explaining the different types of fires.
Now, there's actually 3 types of bushfire. You have the ground fire, where it's mainly the moss and the peat within the ground smouldering away. Then you have a surface fire where it breaks the ground and can affect smaller trees and ferns, like this one here was not so lucky in a surface fire. And it can also burn around the trunks of the trees as well and blacken them. But usually the top of the trees is fine. For the fire to get up that high, that's called a crown fire. You have low and high intensity fires. So a high intensity crown fire is when the flames go right to the top of the tree and pretty much destroy the whole thing. But in this case, what we're looking at, even though it's fairly black, is a surface fire. Because as you can see, looking up at the top of the trees, they're still green, lush and beautiful, but the fire's only gone through the surface.
So, Peter, you and I live here. You're in Merimbula, I'm on Phillip Island, and we're seeing our local media all the time. Did that local media paint a picture for you that was different to what you actually saw when you went up through Cobargo?
Yes, I did think Cobargo had been hit worse than what it actually had. It did get hit, but not not to the extent. Even there's another little town on the way called Quorma. I was under the impression that that was just devastated as well, but there was a lot of homes that went, but not to the extent that the media had
we live
made
here.
it.
We live
Yes.
here. We get
Yep.
more of the local media, whereas the overseas media just pick those few images and
That's
run them
right.
over and over and over again. So I think that really explains why I've just been getting so many emails from people just saying, that they're expecting the whole country's on fire
Yeah, they're just
when it's just not true.
no.
We'll have a look
No.
at some of the roadside. We did a little bit of a drive, as I said, over the last few weeks, and we're going to show different stages of the fire impact along the side of the road. So this part here is driving between Jervis Bay and heading down towards Ulladulla in New South Wales. As you can see, no impact. But then a short distance further, we start to see some impact. And what we're looking at here is a surface fire. The tops of the trees have browned off, but they still have leaves. So if it was a high-intensity crown fire, they would be like the matchsticks. So it wasn't a high-intensity fire, which means those trees will bounce back very quickly. And you can see parts of the drive here where you've got some burn on one side, and then all of a sudden you go into another area that's completely burn free. And then after that, you might go through another area that has that fire impact again. As we can see here, looking on the left-hand side of the road, has some fire damage, little bits here and there on the right-hand side of the road, but then you see pockets completely escaped once again. Then you come out into the beautiful open green valleys and pasture and farmland and absolutely fire-free. And all the towns and villages like Ulladulla and Merimbula and Maruya and Narooma and all of these great communities are completely unaffected. These towns are trading and are as beautiful as ever. Like we said before, it's the towns like Malakuta and Cabargo and Mogo that are the hardest hit. So now we're on the Victorian side of the border, and this was only a few days ago, and this rain has been hanging around for a few days, creating floods and all sorts of problems up in Sydney. But down here, just beautiful, slow, steady, soaking rain, which is exactly what we need. It's just been so dry, and I believe several of the fires that have been burning have now been completely extinguished. You can see there on the right-hand side, we would probably describe that one in parts as a high-intensity crown fire. This is along the section of the road that was closed for 6 weeks, Peter.
Yeah.
At the height of those fires going through, and then all of the work that needed to be done to clean it up. Now we've turned off the highway and we're going into Malakuta. This road had only opened a couple of days before we got there, and you can see on the hill in the background, again, it would have been a very high-intensity crown fire. But when you get into the Malakuta township, it's still there.
Yeah.
Yes, there's been a lot of houses lost, but there's been more houses that haven't been lost.
Yeah.
And all the shops are open, looking for business. Like I said, the road had only been open a few days. It's going to take a while for people to go back again. Great, quaint little shops, a gorgeous pub that does the best chicken schnitzel I've had for some time, I've got to tell you. It was really, really nice. Then we come back over the border into New South Wales, and here we are just taking a drive through Eden. And Eden is another area that, although threatened at times, and the skies look pretty scary at times, but the town itself was completely unaffected.
Yeah.
Did you see changing colours in the sky and so forth at Merimbula at various times during those firestorms?
One day, I think either the 1st or 2nd of January, it was dark all day. Woke up in the morning and thought my clock had gone wrong, but just dark up until probably didn't start to get a bit lighter, and then it just had an eerie red tinge. Was sort of late or early evening.
Yes.
Before anything changed, but the smoke was pretty bad most of the time.
Well, of course, we have bushfires every summer. I cannot remember a summer from childhood that we didn't have fires somewhere, usually in national parks, and usually they start by a dry lightning strike, as simple as that.
Yep.
Our traditional custodians of the land have been managing the land beautifully for, thousands of years.
That's right.
And then after a fire goes through, we've just had such a bad combination of dryness and of weather and so forth to create these really unusual conditions this year.
Yeah.
But there are some trees that only grow after the buds are burnt, drop off, and then they open up and seed.
That's right. The New South Wales floral emblem, the Waratah, it'll only regenerate once it's been burned, the seed pods. So
So it
And
is a
yeah,
natural part, but
that's
they
right.
have been certainly well over and above what we're normally used to in terms of
Yeah,
our fire seasons.
that's right.
I did mention that road through Gippsland was closed, and it's now reopened. So as Anthony and I drove through there, and we got out in the rain and enjoyed the rain, and just put a little video together about why that road was closed and what they were doing, and also why we had the opportunity. We got a bit closer to some of these trees, which were burnt 5 weeks ago, and showed the life just busting to get out of those tree trunks.
Yep.
Now, there are times we don't complain about the rain in Australia, and at the moment, it's one of those times. Beautiful soaking rain. But we can see here on the road about 25, 30 k's from Cairn River why it was closed for so long. Because all of these big trees by the roadside, danger of falling, have been pushed right back into the forest, making it a much safer drive. I'm standing here beside what was a high intensity crown fire. There's no leaves at all on the top of the trees. It's been some 6 weeks since the fire went through here, and look at the trees. You've got the black, but it's kind of beautiful with all of that regeneration of green growth coming out. And with this lovely rain we continue to experience, it's not going to be too long until you see more green than black as you drive along this part of the Sydney-Melbourne Coastal Drive.
It's pretty amazing and resilient, the Australian bush, the way it bounces back there, Peter, isn't it?
Oh, it certainly is. Yep.
That's amazing there when you look at how that tree trunk is burnt, but you can just see the life inside just bursting to get out. That particular shot, as well as this one, was taken up in the Murray National Park, just outside of Pebbly Beach. And the road all the way through to Pebbly Beach still remains closed at this stage as they check for tree damage and so forth. They don't want any trees falling across the road, as I said. We were talking about towns that were affected, and we thought they were all but lost, but really they weren't anywhere near as bad as what we thought. And one of those towns was Cobargo. And yes, we made a video there too.
I'm standing here in the New South Wales town of Cobargo. Now, even where I live over on Phillip Island, the news that I was getting through sort of indicated this town was completely wiped out. But again, nothing can be further from the truth.
It was interesting when we went through Cobargo. I mean, there was not a lot of car parks in the main street. We had to drive down a bit before we could find one. And all of these shops are open and trading as normal. You know, there's certainly fire damage, as we can see in this shot here. And we'll just sit on this one for a moment because I want to explain. This is going down the main street of Cobargo. There's plenty more shops going back up the street. There's bookshops, food shops, coffee shops, tea shops, clothing shops, etc. Beautiful, quaint little country village and shops and so forth, all open and trading. Then you've got this patch here where there are about 3 businesses that were lost.
Yeah.
On the other side of the road was pretty much a mirror image with another 3 or 4 lost on that side of the road. Now, I think when the reporters from the media did the story at Cobargo, they framed up a shot that only that burnt and damaged background was behind them. Not all the businesses further up and down the street that were still trading. And that's what gave me the impression that the town was gone.
Yeah, that's right.
Nothing left.
Yeah.
So goodness knows what our international friends overseas are thinking when they're only getting an abbreviated version of that on their media. Cobargo is alive. Cobargo is trading. And Cobargo is beautiful. It really is a beautiful town.
It is. It's a nice
and now more than
village.
ever. Yeah, that's right. Now more than ever, they need people back there. Now, Mogo's the same. We took some photos when we were at Mogo. And here's another classic shot that you see in the media. So there was 3 or 4 craft shops along here that unfortunately the fire got the best of. And when one went up, the rest of them pretty much followed. But then when you look at some of the other shots around the area, there's still plenty of buildings that are going and plenty of shops as well. On the other side of the road, on both sides of the road at this point, plenty of shops along there just trading as normal. Yeah. So it's great to see there's still so much, business well and alive in the town of Mogo. And that Mogo fire, after it went through Mogo, it basically went out to Browley, and there was a last-minute wind change which saved the Brownlee township. Yeah. But unfortunately, one of our Sydney-Melbourne touring partners lost their home and their office and their Airstream, they call it Bambino at the Bower.
Yeah.
and they don't think they'll be open for, six, possibly 9 months. So it shows how big that fire was that went through. Then it went right across the Mogo Zoo as well. So you sort of think, all of these animals in enclosures and, different areas within the zoo, what hope have they got? Well, that's a good news story, and we'll be coming back to that one a little bit later on. So, Peter, tell me a bit about Sapphire Waters Motor Inn.
We're a 29-room motel. We're based just on your way into town, which is it is just a short walk to the main CBD and the restaurants and clubs. We have different style and different types of rooms to cater for all different occasions and guests.
I'm really impressed with the refurb. Every time I go there, I see another few more rooms that have been. I mean, the showers are just beautiful in those refurbished rooms.
Yeah, they're good rainforest showers.
Yeah, yes. They're lovely.
Yes,
and the beds are just so fluffy, cozy, and comfortable, and the linen and the quality of all the stuff. You've obviously started with what was a basic motel and really just lifted the game. Anthony and I have stayed there many times. We've had great family trips that have stayed there as well. And I think, if I can say, one of the greatest assets of Sapphire Waters Motor Inn is you and Steve and your knowledge of the area. I mean, once when Lorraine and I were there, I remember Steve saying, "Oh, have you been to this part in this national park? And have you seen that?" I learnt more in half a day with Steve than I've learned in 9 years of Sydney, Melbourne touring, some of these great little getaways and so forth. So you must get out yourself and explore.
We do like
region.
to explore a bit. Yeah. Do some little walks and find these little beaches that are tucked away.
It really is an amazing place. I think we might have a question here, Peter. So just let me have a look at my iPad. I don't have set up so it stays on. It sort of goes to sleep, but I've got Anthony waving at me, and it's just connecting at the moment. So I'm not sure what he's waving at me for yet, but hopefully it'll connect in a moment. No, still not seeing anything. You might have to sing out if there's a question there, Anthony.
Elaine Price.
Elaine.
Yes. Well, pass it to you.
Okay. Elaine Price is one of the people who actually did one of our family trips, has come along here. And Lorraine is just sensational, Elaine, and I'm glad she's watching. What have we got here? Well, thanks so much for streaming. Clients and coming out in April. That's fantastic. Clients coming out in April. Well, we've put the weather on, Elaine. We certainly have. We've all organised this rain because we knew that you were sending some clients through to do that in April. And April is an absolute beautiful time of the year to be travelling through. So that's great. I just wonder why my chat there is not loading anymore. But that's wonderful news. Thank you. And it's great to have support from the industry, continuing to promote the country and sell great drives like the Sydney-Melbourne Coastal Drive, which Elaine has done as a part of a gold medal travel for Mel that we did. I think it was March last year, Anthony, or the year before? No, the year before now. Gosh, time flies when you're having fun.
It certainly does.
All right, Peter. Well, thanks so much for your time.
That's okay.
I think
Thank you, Paul.
you're very welcome. We had an opportunity to talk with a lot of our product partners along the drive, and we'll run that video now on their impact.
Thank you.
What was different about these fires is that we had a number of fires going over a long period, stretched out across the east coast of Victoria, New South Wales, and then into South Australia. So because they all happened in different areas at the same time, it looked like the whole southeast of the country was on fire, and that's not true. It was a great line. It looked good in the media, but it just wasn't true.
As you can see, the place is still untouched. It's still beautiful. You wouldn't even know we've had fires around here. I'm very, very lucky, but we just need people to come back again. Yeah.
It was really the goodwill. It was people willing to drive the extra hours coming down that sort of kept us ticking over, and people taking that extra effort to make sure that they supported our community as well, that kept us going. But we did close for about 17 days in that time.
We've been impacted a lot, unfortunately. We haven't been able to fly since about the middle of December last year. It's been mainly the smoke, which has impacted the visibility, which is a great shame. But at the same time, that will clear. And we're fortunate that we've been lucky to gear up and get some stuff done and be in a good spot to fly people again as soon as the smoke clears up and we can get out there.
So the town itself wasn't directly hit at all. We could certainly see the glow. If you can see behind us just over the hills, it was a very bright orange and red glow. So we knew they were close. Brethren was surrounded by fire, so some pretty close towns to us were hit. But Benzel itself was very lucky and very much supported by crews as well, so we all felt very safe in Bensdale.
Paperbark Camp has been here for 20 years, and I think when Mum and Dad bought the property, they actually looked at the trees here to see if there had actually been any fire scarring, and there was none. So they thought it was actually a good property to build on, and thus far that's proven true. We've been in the 20 odd years that we've been here. We've been closely brushed with maybe 2 or 3 fires in that time.
We originally got our advice to evacuate our guests on the 28th of December. We were fully booked, so we had to assist both domestic and international guests for ways to leave while it was still safe to do so. That's only the second time since we opened the cottages in 2005 that we've been in a position that we've had to do that. But we're well versed and we're also well set up by the Incident Control Centre with what to do and how to assist people.
No, they were completely understanding. They knew why they had to leave. I mean, especially with the news and stuff like that, of what was going to happen on the 4th. So they were very understanding. They had plenty of time to pack up and go. It's not like leave now, the fire's going to be here in 30 minutes. So we had a lot of time to get them prepped and out of here, and everything shut down before the fires actually came through.
But we got through it, and really it's now just about bouncing back from that. We had some guests that were in-house at the time that actually evacuated and then came back because they were having such a great time. So as soon as it was safe to do so, they resumed their stay, which was wonderful.
The community really pulled together to defend Gypsy Point as a whole. Malakuta, there's a very big community spirit there too.
The fire shed just became a hub of activity of people dropping in food, dropping in lovely baked goods, checking in to see what they could do to help the team. And so Tanja definitely came alive as a community of support and people just communicating together about what their intentions are, just supporting the fire crew, basically knowing what an awesome job they were doing.
So we sort of know each other a bit better now, and I think we had a community barbecue on the foreshore just a couple of days ago, Paul. I've never seen so many people at that barbecue, and I think that's a direct result of people really want to connect and they want to know their neighbour and they want to look after their neighbour and they want to know that we've got each other's backs if it were to ever happen again.
And the community really got together to prep the village because in the brigade, we told them they had to do a lot more cleaning up and get those gutters cleaned of leaves and tidy up their gardens and all those sort of simple jobs. And the community got right in and did all that and helped each other and really worked really well together.
I think too, for me, there was such a sense of support and concern for one another. We're a tiny little village, 2 tiny little villages, and we know each other so well. It's like being in a lovely family. And wherever you went, people were looking out for you. Had a real sense of a great community resilience, a great sense of caring and support for one another, which is pretty special.
Well, very lucky. We got a wind change at the right moment. We also have a number of natural fire breaks or semi-natural fire breaks around the area. We also have a small slip-on truck with a small pump, and the property here itself has fire protection as well with pumps and dams. And the town was very much aware, as we are every season, that we need to be prepared for fire. We live in an Australian bush with thousands of hectares of national park on our doorstep. So we're always very conscious of fires and we prepare very well for them.
Nor'easterly prevailed, and we've just been so lucky and we're so grateful. Really, Tilba has remained unaffected. The Brinnet Tilba, as you can see, is still standing. We're ready to get moving again, and we just need to take a bit of iron off windows. And
I decided to stay here just to make sure that the assets for Discovery were protected because it's my park, so I didn't want to see it go up if I could help it. Not that I could probably done a lot, but at least in my mind that I did all I could do. But luckily the fireys were here with their trucks in order to keep it back. and that way, because if they didn't, the park would have been gone. And they said that straight up. If they weren't here, the park would have been gone.
The community pulled together pretty well. It was only the visitors that were evacuated from Tathra, and I think there were concerns about road access and what would be happening. Most of the locals did stay, and pretty well all of the visitors did depart. But we had road closure issues to the north, west and south. But all the roads are now open again.
And we've got to be really conscious that the media loves flames. You know, the old line, if it bleeds, it leads, it goes onto the front pages. And quite often when you watch media reports, they'll show the same footage over and over and over again because they've picked out the worst bit of footage that they can put on, and that's actually not the reality.
That is so true there with Michael Lenny from Walhalla Star Hotel finishing up that little segment there. And Elaine's just made another comment to say it's been 2 years. Elaine, it seems like it was only yesterday since we did that fabulous Vermil along the coastal drive, and you'll be very pleased to know that the bulk of it is still very well intact. I'm sure you noticed Loz there on the, we talked about, you know, the wildlife caring and so forth, and Loz at Tanger Lagoon Camp. When this particular Vermil group come through, Loz had these two little joeys in shopping bags that she was nurturing back for rehabilitation, and all of the agents we had on the Vermil from the UK just melted. No one was interested in the accommodation or anything. They all wanted to cuddle these little joeys. It was a marvellous experience. And Elaine, especially for you, speaking of marvellous experiences, you probably remember this one with Captain Sponge. How are you, Captain Sponge from Magical Oyster Tours?
I'm very well, Paul. How are you, Elaine? Welcome to my nightmare.
We had this, there was two people on the boat. One loved oysters, and Elaine, who'd never tried one before, took quite some time, you know, and
is now a convert, Paul.
I don't know. You have to type here, Elaine, and tell me if you've ever had. Elaine says, "I'm good, thanks, Captain."
That's good.
You can type on here and tell me, have you ever had an oyster since? We need to know whether or not you are a convert. And while you're waiting for the delayed time to catch up and answer that, I'll just ask you about, you know, this horrible season. Well,
yep.
You're an oyster farmer among other activities.
Yep.
Tell me what sort of impact has this horrible season had on your business as a tour operator as well as a producer?
Yeah, well, look, the oysters are still there, and they've been fairly well kind of encased in ash from the fires, I guess you could say. There's a lot of semi-scorched leaves have been kind of sent up into the atmosphere, ended up in the ocean, and then because the wind was blowing from the south, those leaves have ended up in particularly Marimbula Lake, which is one of the lakes that I farm in. So there's a lot of ash and these kind of scorched leaves stuck around oyster infrastructure and that kind of thing. The oysters seem, to me at least, they seem fine. And they're still fat and they're still edible and we're still selling them and all that kind of thing. And that ash is slowly clearing as we get the big tides and, of course, this beautiful rainfall that we've got. The oyster farm tour that I do, my Captain Sponge thing, well, it's been pretty quiet, to be quite honest. We've got some cruise ships that come in that I get groups off. But as far as day-to-day kind of Christmas, New Year, and, you know, early kind of festive New Year season type stuff goes, it's been pretty quiet.
And you mentioned before the rain. I mean, unfortunately, our people from the UK can't see because of the time of the day, the wonderful backdrop we have here. But, you know, Anthony did put a photograph on before just to show where we're sitting. We've done several live streams during the course of today just to meet business hours on every market around the world. So we really want to get the message out that, you know, we're open for business.
Yeah.
And pretty much the bulk of the day, I have just watched this rain slow and steady and soaking. And for you guys, that's really good, isn't it? What's the impact between that steady soaking rain and a massive downpour?
Oh, mate, look, we love a bit of rainfall, and the oysters love rainfall as well. But more importantly, it's kind of put those fires or dare I say out.
Some have been completely extinguished. On the road. You're right. Yeah.
So, you know, we are open for business. As far as oysters go, the rain goes into the lake and it takes with it some nutrient. The nutrient feeds the algae, and it's the algae that the oysters eat. So oysters love a bit of rainfall. This time of year, the oysters are that fat, they're ready to spawn, and that's what they normally do this time of year. So a bit of rainfall will actually activate their spawning. And if you get on Facebook, you can see a bit of that actually. A mate of mine has put some of that on. So, you know, oyster farmers are madly, if they haven't already, getting their catching infrastructure out in the water and all that kind of thing. And it's a pretty busy time of year.
Yeah, that's just amazing. We do have a comment back here from Elaine who answered that question, who said, "We'll never forget my experience, ha, and has never been repeated."
There's no accounting for taste, is there, Paul?
Yeah, that's right. I can completely understand that.
Good on you, Elaine.
I've got to say I'm not a big fan of the actual taste of oysters myself, but my mother loved them. My father jumped in sometimes with his gumboots on, sometimes not, and he would chuck them off the rocks and hand them straight up to mum and, you know, down the hatch. Not a problem. And my colleague Anthony, who I travel with, I give him my share and he eats that plus that again. No problem at all. No problem at all.
Perhaps he will be your boss one day.
You never know. You never know. I guess one of the other stories that so many people have seen on their nightly news splashed around the world is our wildlife.
Yep.
That, you know, there's a few videos of distressed wildlife which nobody likes to watch, but those images have been grabbed and gone all over the world.
Yep.
And it's very sad. You know, it's a very sad thing that's happened. But there's some great things happening with our local wildlife. I spoke before when Peter was here about the fire that went through Mogo and went completely over Mogo Zoo, yet not one animal was lost in that fire at Mogo Zoo. And then Loz, who I spoke about before, who was nursing the little joeys and so forth. You know, she's a local wildlife carer. So she looks after injured wildlife and gets them rehabilitated. But then released back into the wild. But the stories she's got about these local wildlife warriors who go into the bird bush and set up these little food stations and so forth and monitor them with the correct diet just amazes me. Let's take a look at the video now.
Yeah, sure.
There's a little strong sense of having saved the koala habitat, because the New South Wales koala remnant population of wild koalas is very small and very struggling for habitat. And the figures coming out of what is potentially gone, not really sure, you know, they're all just guesswork right now. But the remnant population here, their habitat's intact, which is fabulous.
So we were very fortunate. I guess the Mogo Wildlife Park has an amazing team, and that's why we're still standing. When everyone else was told to evacuate from the town, the zookeepers turned up here and helped fight the fires to keep it safe for the day. So from 6 a.m. in the morning, we were putting water onto every square inch of the park. For that real central part of that day when it got really crazy, we were fighting fires on every square inch of the place. And then finally, when that southerly changed in the evening, we felt like we got on top of it for the most part. And then we put out spot fires for, I think, about the next 4 or 5 days.
But to provide food for the population that's here now so that it can feed up and breed up to then replace what's been lost in burnt out forests. So there was a lot of question initially about should we be feeding the wildlife, but it was an absolute overwhelming yes. Let's feed them the appropriate food, especially access to water, and then they're not going to rely on it because it's such a short time. And if you take certain processes into account of how to put the food out, you can avoid disease sharing and other things as much as possible. So yeah, there's a really strong, and it's still happening, group of locals who are going out there on a daily basis or checking food stations every 2 or 3 days, making sure that either burnt out forests have some access to water or intact forests have a good breeding population of animals here still.
Yeah, to protect the animals, it really depended on the species. There were sort of, I guess, different categories. So there were certainly animals we were just able to essentially leave where they were. Where they were was safe. We then had some smaller animals like primates, like the marmosets and tamarins, and even the red pandas where they were was not safe. So they got packed into travel containers and they came up to my house, which is on site. We had the big dangerous sorts of animals like the lions, tigers, gorillas, orangutans that were all moved into their night dens, given plenty of food, plenty of water, and then kept separate from what was going on. And then the really big stuff like the giraffe and the rhino and the zebra were given access to every single paddock that we have along our boundary, which meant that they could then put themselves where they felt most safe in proximity to the fire.
So that really is one of the remarkable stories at the Mogo Zoo, with not a single animal being lost, and what a team, eh? Those people that that they don't just work at a zoo; it's their passion, it's their life, and their babies, so to speak, are under threat, and people are asked to evacuate and get out of the area. And the first thing, without hesitation, all the staff, Chad was telling me, straight to the zoo.
Yeah.
How can we help keep everything protected? They did a marvellous job.
And it worked, mate, didn't it? And all those animals are still there and safe as they were from when it first started.
Yeah, absolutely.
So very selfless kind of act.
Yeah, it's wonderful. I think that human spirit's just so awesome at times.
Mm.
And speaking of, all those animals being still there, all those animals are still right along the coastal drive. We've seen so many just grazing in paddocks on the side of the road, kangaroos and so forth, as we've come through. So it's been pretty special. But, you live in this patch, you live in this beautiful area called Sapphire Coast.
Yep.
What's so special about this area for you? And we'll run some video while we're listening.
Oh, mate, look, for me, I just love the natural beauty of this area, the beaches, the animals, obviously, the cliffs, the surf, the fishing, the animals, of course. You got to look at the wildlife and stuff as well. But we got so much going for us as far as that natural beauty goes, which hasn't been kind of invaded by human beings to a large degree. So, and for me as an oyster farmer, obviously I want clean water to grow oysters in. So we've got this beautiful clean water, and the oysters love it, and as a result, we're growing a really great product.
The whole South Coast has really got that. I think they've had it as a marketing term for some time, and it's unspoilt. It really does sum up the region, doesn't it?
Absolutely. And as you go down the coast, it's very, very much the same. There he is, look out. It's very much the same right the way down. There's industry, there's not a lot of agriculture and that kind of thing. So it's really, the coast the way it should be.
And things like, the art galleries and the beautiful national parks and the green parks with the cycling trails and so forth going through, the famous Killer Whale Museum and the story of Old Tom that we're looking at on screen there now. Not him, but the skeleton of the whale, the old
whaling station.
Do you know the story of Old Tom?
I have heard it, yes.
Well, just give us a brief version of it.
I'll give you an abridged version. It was a killer whale that used to more or less tell the whalers where the whales were, and as a reward, once they killed that whale, he'd be fed the tongue, something along those lines. So he would actually lead the boat with the rope in his teeth, and there's actually a wear mark in his teeth where he was leading the boat along for so many whaling expeditions.
Incredibly intelligent animal.
Oh, yes. Amazing.
Yeah,
amazing.
But thankfully we don't hunt whales anymore. In fact, this area of the coast now, we call it the Humpback Highway. And I was talking before to Amanda from Sapphire Coast Tourism in an earlier stream, and she was saying that, it's one of the most popular places in Australia as they, come around that far east coast corner of Australia and work their way up to Harvey Bay for the breeding.
Yeah. No, they're everywhere, mate. They're everywhere.
Pretty amazing. Do they ever come into Pambula?
They'll often come into Merimbula Bay, and you'll see them kind of frolicking around Merimbula Bay, and then they'll hang around maybe for a few hours or whatever, and then they make their way. Normally when they're heading south, they'll make their way out of the bay, and then off they go, and then some more will come in. It's I wouldn't say it's a daily event when they're coming into Merimbula Bay, but certainly weekly at least.
Yeah, beautiful experience.
Yeah.
I was a bit further up the south coast on Montague Island, and it was in whale season, and both sides of the island, out in the ocean and the passage between Montague Island and Narooma, you can see the whale spouts, and it's a pretty amazing experience.
It's pretty cool.
But look, we do digest.
Yes.
We probably need to go into wrap-up mode now because we're trying to keep these within 45 minutes. I've got 2 minutes to wrap up.
Right. Quick.
Basically, the total roads affected is less than 18%. That's the fire-affected roads. If you're on that main drive between Sydney and Melbourne, you can go off and explore and you might see more affected roads. So that's 82% of the drive that is unaffected. The main roads are open, but some of the side roads are still closed, like the road into Pebbly Beach through the Murray Moraine National Park.
You got it that time.
I'm determined to get it. I'm determined to get it. And my beer's finished too, so I can't blame that anymore. And then Cape Conarin in Victoria is another area where there's still some fire activity. But I'm hoping this rain we've had is going in that direction now, because it's about 3 hours away from us. If you've still got visitors coming into Australia during our fire seasons, thankfully we don't have seasons every year like the horrific one we've had this year, but there are some very good apps and they're organised by the state government. So we'll just take you through those now. I'll start with the Victorian one. This is the Vic Emergency website, and they do have an app that you can download to your smart device. They're all state-based, so this one covers the state of Victoria. And as we zoom in, you can sort of see some of the areas where the fire impacts have been. And you click on one of those little icons there, and then it gives you more information about what's going on. You can click the more info button, and it gives you a very detailed description on what's happening in that particular patch. The Victorian Emergency app and page does not just cover bushfire, but any sort of activity that could be happening in the area. And you might also see in some of those areas there, like that blue patch there, Anthony, if you click on that blue patch or that blue icon there, that's probably a smoke alarm. So whilst it's not a burn area, it is an area where they are expecting that there's going to be smoke or other community sort of information. So this one here is just more information on the bushfire activity and where it's all situated at the moment. That's the Victorian one. If we have a look at New South Wales, it's very similar. That one is put out by the regional fire, the Rural Fire Service, I should say. And Sponge, I guess you've been on this one quite a bit over the last 6 weeks.
I've been keeping a very close eye on that over the last kind of month to 6 weeks for sure. So when you kind of look at these things and you start recognising the names of places where those icons are, that's when you start taking a fair bit of notice of where the wind's blowing from and how likely it is to flare fires up and that kind of thing. Thankfully, you can see there's that spot right there between all those dark areas. That's Bega, Tathra, Merimbula and Eden. We were very, very fortunate. And now we've had in places over 150, nearly 200 millimetres of rainfall in places. So I would hazard to say that perhaps the fires are nearly out.
Yeah,
certainly not the risk they once were.
Absolutely, and I did hear some of them were completely extinguished by the rains,
absolutely,
which is really good. But the further you go inland, it's whether it got all the way up into that high country or whatever. We wait and see. You've also got the road traffic pages as well. So there's a Victorian and New South Wales one equivalent. So take us through the New South Wales one.
So live, you're saying to me, Paul, live traffic New South Wales, it'll basically give you, you can see all the icons there and what have you. If there's any road closures, road works, any kind of warnings that you need to be aware of, and details and that kind of thing, you can click on the icons there and you'll be able to see if there's going to be any interruption to your travel plans. Pretty straightforward. Just download it onto your iPhone or whatever.
Yep, and that's on the Victorian side. There's the Vic Roads, Vic Traffic site. It's pretty much exactly the same thing, just different colours, but tells you where roads are closed, and that's the ones in red, but also where there's roadworks and things happening that might disrupt the flow of traffic. So as I mentioned earlier, these are state government sites, and they do have the apps. So if you have travellers coming to Australia and they want to keep a more detailed eye on what is actually happening rather than the reports they're seeing in the media, those road closure apps or road information apps, as well as the emergency and fire apps, are very good things to download to your smart device. So Sponge, I guess we've got to call it a day or a night.
Yes, night indeed.
And let the people in Europe and the UK get on with their busy day that's ahead of them, and we might have another coldie before the.
That sounds like a capital idea, Paul. I'd go one of them for sure.
So I'd like to say thank you very much for everybody for watching our live streams. I hope you found them useful, and they do provide some much more detailed information than what you've been getting on your media. We'd like to finish up with a short closing video, and just ahead of that, I'll say we are open for business. Thank you.